what was a typical day like on the set of that music video? What was your experience like?
The typical day is hard to define, I think, because
what is one of the most creative solutions you've had to a technical problem that you've faced?
the fly-through shot in the music video. I have this big idea. How do I get it to something that's realistic to make?
Speaking of creation, AI is a huge topic now. What do you think the impacts of that will be on the filmmaking industry?
It used to be about how they work, and now I'm like thinking about the ethics and the social implications. And
So Ryan, you are a marketer turned freelance videographer and photographer. And in that time, you've covered everything from live music to podcasts to music videos to product demos. And you also have a background in computer science. You have so many topics to reach upon. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here, and welcome to the show.
dude, thanks for having me. I'm stoked.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your journey and that transition from marketing to freelance videography. What made you go down that route?
It's almost like the reverse of that. So like I got into video editing and sort of like a lot of multimedia. That's what they called it back then in school. Like it was a high school program. And I learned how to edit. I learned a little bit about how to shoot. We did like live broadcasts for sports games and stuff like that. And that's kind of what I thought I was going to do, especially when midway through college. And I was studying computer science because I thought it was like related. I thought I might do some like graphics programming for movies and stuff like that. And then I just ended up not liking it that much. But I worked a videography job right out of college. And I was in-house for one of the centers at the university that I had attended. And then when the pandemic hit, all the video work kind of just vanished for a second.
Gone.
And there was like nothing to do. And I was like, at the time, like I didn't have much of an other plan. And so like I kind of needed that job. And they were like, well, you can do marketing here instead. Not really instead, but kind of like in addition to, we'll still have you do video if anything comes up. But right now we need marketing. And so that's what I ended up doing there. And I did that for about two and a half years there. And video kind of grew back, but just not to what it had been. And I had other marketing responsibilities. So then I got another marketing job after that because that's kind of what my skill set was in, or my resume said. And I had always planned to get back to video. And then the opportunity came finally. And I say opportunity, I got laid off in October of last year. And I think of that as just like the little push I needed to kind of like return to my roots, and like it just forced me to get back into and really jump into the freelance world, which takes bravery and it takes persistence that I don't know if I was ready for before that. So in short, that's what it was.
Okay. What kind of persistence and bravery did you learn about freelance? Because we all have our own journeys. What did you experience?
Persistence and bravery are both critical to this. I don't know if I can really claim to be that brave. I think if I was brave, I would have quit and ran at it myself. But also, like, because you're funding yourself, like you're responsible for your income, and no one's going to give you a regular paycheck. You just have to, like, if you don't have a project to work on, you got to be doing something to try to find work. And so, kind of like, it was hard at first to frame it this way, but approaching that as a fun problem to solve, like, I don't know, I did marketing before this. That's what I'm supposed to be somewhat skilled at. So like, it's not my favorite thing to do. I'd rather just be doing the work, but there is kind of like you can turn it into a puzzle. And I think the persistence then becomes, just like figuring out how to enjoy that puzzle solving. In terms of bravery, though, I don't know. There is part of the reason I never like quit my marketing job to kind of pursue the original plan right away was because I was scared of failing and not finding work. And then, now that I'm doing it, I've had multiple times where I'm like, oh man, like it'd be nice to have a consistent paycheck. And, so I've kind of let out some more like rules or guiding principles where I'm like, there are two things I really care about. One is like, I guess the simplest thing is just to keep showing up, like keep like the persistence aspect.
Consistency,
is like, it's much easier to do that with this, because with marketing, I kind of like, I understood it, but I didn't have an intuition with it. And video and filmmaking are a little bit more, they feel more natural to me. I just think in that way a little bit more. And so it's not like it's hard to show up. It's just kind of just creating a habit set and kind of having this like mindset of like, my paycheck's not coming to me anymore, and work is not being assigned to me anymore. It's my responsibility to go figure out what needs to be done.
Right.
And then the other thing is like, on top of that, on top of the persistence of like showing up to it as like a day job, when there's no work, I still want to be doing work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I kind of heard this as like a networking tool, but also just as a guiding principle. It's so much easier to network with people and make connections and start actually collaborating and eventually getting hired for stuff if you are already doing stuff.
Yeah.
And it's hard when you're just starting out in freelance, because I have a skill set and I have like a portfolio of video work, but I don't have a freelance level portfolio because that's not what I've been doing for this amount of time. And so, or that's not what I was doing for, before 2023. And so, like knowing that I'm going to have to just do 60 hours, 70 hours a week for a little bit and do and make stuff even when I'm not getting paid for it, does a lot, because number one, I'm adding to my portfolio. Number two, I can be like, hey, come help me with this, or this is what I did this week, and like it's social proof that I'm a filmmaker. And also like it's just reps, it's just practice.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a litmus test of just like, I do love this because I've been doing that kind of stuff on the side, and it's been rewarding. So
Okay. I know, at least for me in my freelance journey, like, the hours are long. Like I've put in easily, 12-hour days, 15-hour days, and that just happens a lot. But at the same time, like you said, it's incredibly rewarding because you get to work for yourself. You get to chart your own journey, because ultimately you're responsible for yourself. Your paycheck isn't going to be delivered to you. You have to go out and get it. And, there's something both terrifying and liberating in that, because there's unlimited upside to what you can do, but you also don't have that safety net below you anymore.
Call it a lighting a fire underneath my ass, dude. Like I really have like tried to reframe how I think about that so much. Because I think I actually do like the challenge. I feel invigorated and like connected to my body when I'm like, hey man, you need like food next week. How are we going to do this? And it's not that dire most of the time, but it is just more challenging to have to think about things that way. And in a sense, at first, I felt like I was leaving, or I was like knocking the creativity of my work down a tier to focus on the business building side of things. And I think like, not that like my work suffers but I don't think about that part as much, and I've had to it's almost like I have to have confidence in my skills that I already have, and be like, this is actually what I'm learning is not freelance, like it's not video, it's not film. What I'm learning is running a business. And that's been weird because I've never thought of myself as someone who wants to run a business or like is a business, like an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. But like I said, some of those challenges are kind of fun, and I start to not notice that I am working those long hours because the problem solving is fun. And I would rather, like get lost in something like that than I don't know, whatever I was doing before. There was a few things, but like I would honestly, like it how long is it supposed to take to form a habit? Like 21
Something like that.
days
Yeah,
of
3 weeks.
consistent. Yeah. You start thinking in that mindset for long enough, it just kind of becomes something you come back to. I think I turned that corner maybe a month or two ago, and honestly, it's helped.
Okay.
Okay.
The joke that my girlfriend and I always have is, I was at Microsoft for a little bit. I worked really hard at that job, and I traded one job working long hours, and I didn't want to do that because I was working too hard. And then I traded that for 10 jobs, working even longer hours. But now I get to control the direction that it goes. Because like you said, you don't always get to work in the business that you have. You often spend time working on the business. So the admin stuff, you got to figure out how taxes work. You have to figure out how to market yourself. Hey, web design is now a skill set that you have to have. And there's all these different hats that you now have to wear in addition to the thing that your business strives to do.
Yeah, totally. I guess first things first, I have no idea how taxes work. If you're a CPA, I need your help. There's so many things to keep track of. I feel like I've met a lot of people who freelance who are here like specifically because they like to choose what they want to do and they don't mind the chaos because their most important thing is like, I want to choose what I want to work on. And I think like I'm partially there. Like I do love variety in my work. And so, if, like a desk job where it's like the same responsibilities every day or every week, that is draining to me. But I'm also not like, I need to work for myself. Like that's not also kind of like how I approach it. And I would totally like, I would be open to full-time employment if the role made sense and just kind of like utilize skills and was about things that I like. But right now this is just what fits. And so I've just been like embracing that. I have no problem with like being at a music shoot one night and then being at a photo shoot in the morning. Like that's a fun dynamic for me.
So going from working on the business to working in the business, what does a typical shoot day look like for you, if you can define a typical day?
Yeah, it's a great question. Man, stuff is different enough that it depends. But my ideal shoot day starts with a coffee and some creative like ideation. I don't know. If you do enough pre-planning, showing up to the set is easy. You got your gear to prep. You show up. Hopefully you got some buddies. Hopefully this is not a solo job, but if it is, whatever. And you get to load in, set up. And I've realized that this like setup time is so fun, and it can be like super, because you can just talk to people while you're being creative and like trying to set up. Hopefully it's something interesting. Hopefully it's not just like a white cyc wall shoot or something, but the setup is really like a fun time to get to know folks. And that's been huge for me, just networking as a freelancer, someone who's kind of new to the freelance scene. And then, it's kind of weird. Like, especially working in tech, I was always, somebody's employee. And so anytime it came time to like push the big reg button, that was someone else's call.
Right.
But when it comes time on set to roll, like that's your call now, like you get to decide. Like right before we started recording this, you're like, all right, I think it's time now. Like if you're ready,
let's do it. Yeah.
And that also is a really cool moment too. So you just kind of like decide to be confident, get going, and then I don't know, you shoot for however long you need to shoot. Mm-hmm. There's some tear down, and ideally there's some coffee in the middle of that also, and a lunch break. One of the things I really appreciate and what makes it easier to be on set for long days is just the social aspect of it.
Okay.
I used to work from home when I worked a marketing job. Mm-hmm. Both my marketing jobs before this, after the pandemic hit, were from home. And as an extrovert, I do feel like I've tested this over the years. I'm pretty sure I am like a purebred extrovert. Like everybody is always like, I'm like an introverted extrovert. I think I'm just extrovert. That's fine, whatever. Like, and so I really appreciate those times on set because they're also just hanging out with people.
Yeah,
And
you know, you get to shoot the shit with your friends, assuming there are buddies around. Like you said, it's just, there's busy work, there's stuff to do, but at the same time, everyone has their roles and responsibilities. Just kind of do that, but you hang out as the day is going. You get to have that conversation. Oh, one moment, I need to go do this real quick. You walk away for 5 minutes, come back, and then you pick up right where you left off, and it's nice.
Yeah, totally. And ideally, you're giving yourself enough time where, you know, you're not crunched in getting things done. So you can, you know, you can make a joke and people will laugh.
Yeah.
Instead of be like, make a joke and people are like, will you stop messing around, dude? It's like, we got stuff to do.
Yeah, so let's tie this back into a real world example. You mentioned that you worked on a couple of music videos this year. What was it like on set there? What was your experience like? Can you tell me more?
Yeah. So, I mean, first things first, like those sets were my sets, which is like fun to say because getting started in freelance, I have gotten hired by a lot of people, awesome people, love those people. They've helped me out so much and taught me a lot. And so, but that's like these music videos have been kind of born out of that spirit that I was talking about earlier, which is even when I am not getting paid to make stuff, I want to still be making stuff. And these projects I wanted to like, you know, I've always probably for 14, 15, however, my freshman year of high school is when I first started editing video. And so I've been doing this kind of stuff a long time, but I was like, I need like some flagship projects. This felt like in some way like a capstone, even though it feels like an entrance into the scene. So
what was a typical day like on the set of that music video? What was your experience like? How did all of that go?
A typical day is hard to define, I think, because they've been so different types of shoots. The music videos that I've done, there are options, right? You can do so many. I get really inspired by seeing music videos that have like styles that I would have never guessed. But for mine, both of them had a studio performance like section to it. Okay. So there was one day for each where we were in the studio and we had set up sort of this, environment. One of them was a small studio. There was a bigger one. And the first thing I learned about that, dude, you got to give yourself time to make that look right. Because if you expect to like show up at 8 and start shooting at 9, no,
it's ambitious.
Like, that's not happening. I found that out pretty fast on the first one, but no, it's cool. Like once you get going, to shoot a music video like that, you're especially with a band full of like the one that we just released for Love So Deep, that they have 4 band members, and in that particular environment, like I wanted a few different wide takes of them playing through the whole song. Yeah. But then I also wanted a couple of close-ups of each of them, a couple of takes full through the song. And so, man, that for the band, it's like, you got to tell them like it's going to be a bit of a haul. Like,
yeah.
You're just going to play your song like 20 times a day.
Yeah.
And maybe it's 30. Like, and I'm just going to like, wander around and try to get the shots, and then you take the best parts of those used for the edit. But like you still learn stuff as you go. So from when you start shooting at maybe like 11 and then 4 o'clock rolls around and you're like, wow, we've changed a lot since we first started. And it is kind of fun to see how things evolve that way. That problem solving on set is part of the reason it's just one of the things I love. Problem solving, because you can plan all you want and then you get there and you're like,
of course,
well, what are we going to do about this? So, yeah. And then everybody looks forward to by the time you've done, like a hard day's work, when you get to say that's a wrap.
Yeah.
And then there's loadout, and hopefully my favorite thing to do, honestly, is to go get food with everybody if there's time for that. Because like I said, I love the social aspect.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think maybe a typical day that's in the studio, but then the more weird, interesting stuff is when you're out in the world on location somewhere and you're like, for Love So Deep, we did some stuff in a car, and we did some stuff like with the car parked on the side of the street. And those were both very different experiences, but they were not as controlled as the studio setting. And communication is harder in those environments because, you're outside, and maybe like, for example, for some of that music video, there was driving involved. And so we were in like a pilot car, and then the band was behind us, and we were, every time we had to like communicate with them, we'd like call them up and be like, all right, guys, like flip it around the block one more time. I'm gonna come up on the other side. And stuff like that. And that was funny because at a certain point we were slowing down traffic. But it's rock and roll. So you say, you
just gotta roll.
Yeah. Anyway, lots of variety.
Okay. No, yeah. What's one of the big things that you've learned by going through that experience with the music video? Was something that you didn't know going into it?
I think I learned that, like, while you can make some really cool stuff with a small team on your own, filmmaking is like a very collaborative thing. There's so many variables to keep track of. Even just within a camera, there are so many positions in in a fully built out camera department.
Okay.
Because there's so many things to keep track of. Like, if you have a camera on a gimbal, which is kind of what we did for one of the shots in the music video at the beginning, and you're trying to do like focus, and you're trying to make sure that every step of the shot is lit the correct way.
Yeah.
And you just realize there's certain things you can't do in that amount of time. And then your role just becomes like optimizer. You're like, okay, I can't get the perfect shot, but what shot can I get that still gets the effect across that I want?
Yeah.
And so like I said, I mean, about problem solving, that kind of comes back to the fun of it, is figuring out what you can get and what you can still be really proud of with the team you have.
Is it?
Yeah, I guess like that's exciting to me because I know that as I meet more people and as my projects get bigger, like just have to have more friends, I guess. Like, dang,
Bring more people on.
Yeah. Oh no.
So for those unfamiliar, what does all of the positions in a fully fledged camera team look like? Obviously, there's a camera or many, but what are some of the other things that people may not know about?
So, I guess to break it down, I guess probably to start off is that I have never actually worked on a fully built out camera department.
Sure. Yeah. No worries.
But here's what I know.
Sure.
You have the director of photography, who is the main person in charge of setting up the frame and making sure that it has the look and feel that you want. And then there are camera operators, depending on how many cameras there are. A DP might operate a camera, but they might not. They might have just regular cam ops do that. There is like camera assistants. First and second AC have slightly different jobs that support the camera operation. Down the line, there are a few other like supporting positions, but and it just kind of depends on how robust your setup is. Like, maybe you need a bunch of ACs and maybe you need one DP and that's it.
Sure.
Yeah. That's all. That's all I really know.
No worries, but like just giant supporting teams. And I have never been on a fully built out camera department as well. But in my experience with small teams, everything operates like a really well choreographed dance, especially in live environments. So like our common meeting sessions in place, Emmy Award winning production, covering live concerts. It's just a giant dance. Like, we have someone on a giant jib operator. It's the giant crane with the camera looking thing for those unfamiliar. We have Brent on Steadicam running around with this giant ass rig to make everything nice and stable. We have a bunch of people on moving sliders to the side, and we have to choreograph all of this together with someone on comm saying, hey, we're about to use this camera, and now we're about to use this camera, and now we're about to use this one. It's amazing to see being pulled off, especially when a team is that in tune with each other to just dance around each other and everything feels perfect.
Yeah, totally. I think even like as I start to get more creative with this, like because right now it's like I said, it's like I'm pretty business focused right now.
Yeah.
But, as I start to get more creative with filmmaking, like thinking about things technically and thinking about the level of complexity you need for certain things, like it can get so profoundly complex, more than I currently understand, and that standard is already pretty high. It becomes a creative problem. It becomes like a question of in the pre-planning, how are you going to make this thing so that it doesn't take like more people than that are in Seattle, you know what I mean? Just more people than you have access to, because oftentimes budgets are limited and you can't hire a full crew for a project. And so, all part of the filmmaking process, maybe like, and that's totally like unrelated to the idea, but it affects the idea that you choose.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that's just something that people don't think about as much, especially when a lot of the content that we interact with, the video content that we interact with, is like social media stuff that's like kind of like point and shoot on your phone. In like a production, there's just so many more things that you have to think about.
Yeah. So you mentioned there was a handoff in one of the music videos that you're doing, a transition between one person holding a camera, passing it to another. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, it was so fun, dude. Did you see the shot?
Oh no, unfortunately I didn't.
Yeah. I don't know. It's it's everywhere on the internet. You can find it.
Show notes down below.
It's a pretty simple idea. Like the idea is like fly the camera through the front seat of a car from the driver's side to the passenger side.
Ah, one of those.
And in the music video, it's like the drums and bass come in all at once. And I was like, that's where the key turns in the ignition. That was kind of that's the image that first hit my head for that idea. And I'm someone who's like always been like, all right, I have this big idea. How do I work backwards to get it to something that's realistic to make? And I think that's actually a really good example of that, because I didn't have a full camera crew. So I know I was going to have access to a focus puller. And I knew I wasn't going to have like a bunch of lights to like rig inside the car to make the lighting perfect. And so there were limitations there, and kind of like even the limitation of being like, okay, I have to put the smallest camera I have on the smallest gimbal I can find because you have to get it through the window. Yeah. Those are like what you would rather do, but it's what you have to do to get the shot. And so planning it out took a certain amount of time. I made storyboards, overheads, and even more overheads, I guess. That was a lot of work. And then I went out with my camera assistant, and we rehearsed it with my car before we had the actual car for the shoot. And that took about 2 to 3 hours. But that rehearsing taught us so much about how we were going to actually get the shot and make it work, because my initial idea for how to hand the camera through was not good. And on paper, I was like, yeah, that's totally going to work, obviously. And then like you get to the scenario and you're like, all right, that's not how physics is. I can totally see Kiara's head in the car, and like I can't run around the car fast enough to catch on the other side. So we ended up doing this thing where we had to leave both the doors open so that there was enough, like you could reach across the seat long enough. We just did one pass from one side to the other, and after enough practice, we got it pretty smooth. Okay. And then there's some choreography in the rest of the shot that kind of like makes it feel like a cohesive long take. But the other cool thing about that shot was, once I had that idea, I was like, okay, cool, but like, what's the story? Like, why does it matter? Are we doing this? Which was fun to think about, because I was like, I want to do this, but I don't know like exactly how to tie it in. And then I thought about the band. I thought about the band Love So Deep, and they've been playing in Seattle for a little over a year now, I think. And one of the things they always do is just they go around town and they put their poster up, and it's a cool poster. It says free LSD on it, and it just has a barcode and free LSD. Love So Deep. And I was always like, I always admired that kind of like entrepreneurial spirit. Like they were just like super about it. And so I was like, man, the shot is just of them doing that. Like they're postering a huge wall. They're going to spray paint it. So it's a little bit more like scandalous because it's like spray paint public, taboo. And then thinking about how to bring the choreography all together on that. How do you make every part of that shot engaging? There's got to be something new to look at every time, every few beats, you know? And so I think the choreography of it was when I landed on something that felt natural and engaging the whole time, I was pretty happy with.
Okay. I think, camera work and filmmaking and cinematography, when it's done well, to an extent, it almost feels like it's invisible to the viewer. That's just how it was meant to be. Like, I wouldn't consider myself a normal person, but I feel like normal people, when they watch TV, they're just consuming it. They're like, okay, yeah, I like the story. It looks good. They're not paying attention to the shot angles, how the focus changes in the scene, the lighting, the colors and the tone, everything that, we as filmmakers pay attention to. The regular person is like, oh yeah, that looks nice. And that's about as deep as it is. But when it's done wrong, anyone can look at that and be like, wow, that is terrible. There's like 17 jump cuts in 2 seconds. I'm going to get dizzy. So it's this fascinating thing to where there's such a level of expression and artistry in it. But when done well, it's almost as if it's not there. But then when it's done exceptionally well, then people will pay attention to it.
Totally. There is kind of that extra step where it's like, if it's like exceptionally well, even untrained folks are going to be able to recognize the artistry in it. And that's pretty cool. Like I would love to live there late in my career, like always. But the first thing they told us in those multimedia classes in high school was like, you are going to be the unsung hero because the only time anybody's going to notice you is when you've made a mistake. And that's like, it's humbling, but I think like, as long as you're not in it for the glory, like, and that's how you know you love it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say is like the next thing you're trying to strive as a filmmaker? Is it a new technical ability? Is it to, bring your creative vision to life? Is it to work on a new project? What kind of aspect of your, progression on this journey are you trying to do next?
It's a great question. I could break it down in a couple of ways.
Okay.
I think I kind of came at filmmaking from the technical side. And so I still have plenty to learn about cameras and audio and lighting and everything. But I'm not as anxious about that as much as I am about sort of like blending some of the design thinking and problem solving with the technical aspects of filmmaking, because I feel like I've always gravitated towards, I like making stuff, and to make stuff, you need to learn how to use the technology. And so that's kind of what I did. I felt like I had an intuition with technology from a young age. And so learning that stuff to a passable degree wasn't like super hard. Thinking creatively outside of the box in a filmmaking sense, thinking like a producer, thinking about how is this piece of media that I want to create, how is that going to like resonate with people, like certain audiences, not like everyone at large, but like certain audiences that might have traits that I'm not like as familiar with, or like certain messages, like how are they told best? And video is not always the best tool. Like, so thinking that way, trying to connect the content to principles, causes, and ultimately just things that people care about.
Okay.
And finding those connections in my own life and making it something that I also care about, because you can get a job and make the video and be like, all right, I didn't like anything about that, but I knew how to do it, so I did it, Ideally, like people, I think, have this idea that you at first just have to say yes to all the work you can get, and you only really get to make what you want down the road once you've, spent your time and developed your sort of like respect in the field, and I think there's some truth to that. Like I think there's some like you especially when you usually make money, you need to make money, but I also think there's some boundaries you can set and just be like, and some directions you can just take yourself in and be like, I want to explore. Like for me, I really love music, and so like as much as I can work with music, whether it be live or music videos, those are more rewarding than other things for me. And I guess maybe I've been really lucky to have found sessions in place, and like the folks there who have hired me for stuff that are similar to that, because I love it.
Yeah.
So
what do you think of the cross? How do I phrase this? I feel like being a filmmaker, you have to be so familiar across various disciplines. Like obviously you have to know how a camera works and cinematography and shots and lighting and all the other stuff, but like most things are done to music. Therefore, you also have to have knowledge of music and beats and, hits and, dramatic moments. Like what are some of the various cross-discipline things that you pull upon to make yourself a better filmmaker?
great question. I guess it's funny. Like I have always had multiple interests, and I am a musician. Like I play guitar and bass, and I have a band in Seattle. And I've always thought that having sort of like a music backbone helps with, filmmaking. And it's not, you can't forget about it. Like really early on, I realized how important the score is to whatever you're making. It's like, dare I say, 60 to 70%. You can be, and that's the thing. It's like you can test this out. You can go watch samples of this. If your video footage is bad but your audio is good, that's still a pretty easy video to follow. But if your audio is bad and your video is good, like no one cares how good it looks, so you can't follow it. The audio experience is so important. So I learned early on how important it was to be able to cut to music well. I'm still practicing that. And then there is something to filmmaking that is ideas and abstract thinking, and I get kind of intimidated sometimes when I think about how much does Christopher Nolan have to know about astrophysics to make Interstellar? Like that's a whole subject there, you know what I mean? And and similarly, a bunch of other filmmakers with all those other movies that have really deep subject matter knowledge. In some ways that's intimidating, but in other ways, I am somebody who's curious about a lot of different things, and I enjoy that. That filmmaking can be an avenue where I can explore those interests. And I hope that one day I can really flesh that out.
Sure. Do you have any filmmakers or movies or shows that have inspired you along your journey so far?
Dude, I feel like I used to be, I think what really got me into stuff, I'm not like super proud of my influences, I guess, is what I'm saying. Like, I feel like I really just liked action movies when I was a kid.
Sure, yeah.
And it's not what I want to make necessarily, but I went through a really big Christopher Nolan phase in terms of filmmaking and like just like the kind of clever cerebral storytelling. But I'm not someone who like spends a lot of time idolizing or obsessing over certain artists or creators. I have probably the highest respect for the people I know and like friends who make things. I just think there's something so special about being a maker, and I feel like a little bit like I'm part of a special club of people who I say it like, I know people are proud when they say like, like I'm a doer. I'm someone who gets stuff done, and I feel like I don't really have that sensibility as much. Like I am not a doer. I'm a maker, and that's what resonates with me. I like to make things. I don't like to do things for the sake of doing them. And I don't know, maybe that's like maybe that's more of where my inspiration comes from. It's just kind of like the collective, almost like spiritual act of creating and bringing something from nothing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. Like, I have a bunch of creative friends. It's how we met. And just, you're right. There's almost a spiritualness to that creative effort, to bringing something, from your vision into either tangible reality, like a sculpture, a painting, or whatever, or you create some music that you can listen to, but just bringing something, forth into existence. There's something really cool about that. And I noticed that it's a common thread shared among almost all creative disciplines.
It connects us in a weird way. Like,
Yeah.
there's something very bonding about it, and the idea that we share this creative spirit. And that's why I've always gravitated towards things that are collaborative. Like, as a musician, like, I used to write my own songs and think like, and maybe I'll like release some solo work, but it's just like so much less rewarding than with a band. Like, I would much rather play with people and create with people, and filmmaking is also that way most of the time. And so, I respect like painters who like just paint on their own, and that's what they do, and that's how they do it.
Yeah.
There's still connection through all that, but I like the physical version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of creation, AI is a huge topic now. What do you think the impacts of that will be on the filmmaking industry and just that creative and, area, visual arts?
I have been really, because it's like I flip-flop back and forth on what I think about this. I'm sure there are people who know things, special secret insider knowledge that I don't know. But I'm very interested in computers. I was a computer science major for a while, and I feel like I gravitate towards conversations about, it used to be about how they work, and now I'm like thinking about the ethics and the social implications, and that's where I spend my time thinking. And particularly in filmmaking and the arts, right? More specifically recently, image generation and video generation.
Yep.
Of course, we've all been so impressed. The side I'm taking right now, and I don't know if I would call it sides, but I guess maybe like the camp I hang out in these days is like, I think that kind of like we've been saying, the act of filmmaking and the art of doing this kind of thing, number one, there's been a industry behind it for 100 years at this point. And I think it's different enough from other types of video making that I think AI video will in some ways always be called that. It will always be differentiated in some kind of category. Because the act of making it is so much different from the act of making a film or a highly produced video or TV show. I think like the word video, we use it for everything, but like there's just so many different things. People call animated videos, and that process is so different, and you wouldn't say that those skill sets are the same. The other thing I think about, the way those tools work, right, is they really shorten the amount of time it takes between your idea and bringing it to life.
Yeah.
Right? You can have an idea, and then you don't have to go hire a team of creative people who like to hang out on set for 14 hours and eat up all your overtime.
Yep.
You can just see something pretty quickly on the other end of it, and it's super powerful, super cool. I think of it like anytime you anytime you decrease a barrier to publishing, creating in some way, you also kind of like dilute the quality of the field you're working in. Right? Like when you invent the printing press, then like all these like mediocre books start coming out, and like you have to wade through all this kind of like not lame stuff, but just like noise maybe to get to the content that feels meaningful to you. So in some ways it's exciting because people's ideas will be out there, and in a lot of ways that's awesome. Representation is great. And then, if you're someone who feels like they're an artist and a filmmaker and wants to strive for whatever quality means to you, I think there's always going to be a space for that. And so I don't think it will strongly affect the jobs of committed filmmakers who want to be doing this kind of thing, because it will have meaning outside of the fact that you can just think up an idea and see a picture.
Yeah. I always thought of AI as a force multiplier. It's a tool, and it really depends on how we use it. Because, like you said, the time between the vision that I have in my head to I can see something on the screen has gotten shorter. So, for, I don't know, like the casual person, like it democratizes their ability to kind of create things quickly. You don't have to have these giganto budgets. You don't have to have this giant ass rig of a computer to render something and all the skill sets associated with that. So you can create things quicker. But on the other side of things, like you also said, now your teams are slimmer. You don't have to have as many people to go and create the thing. And I just wonder what some of the long-term effects on the industry will be. I think that there will be a smaller few that will collect more money because they're able to deliver faster with higher quality, because it's a force multiplier. They're doing what they're doing just faster. And for others on the lower end of stuff, it may take away their ability because they're not needed anymore. So I think the next, honestly, 2 years, but I would say long-term 5 to 10 will be really telling on how all of the waves from AI will shake up the industry.
Totally. And it'll totally be I think we do this as a shorthand because it's hard to talk about the breadth of possibilities.
Yeah.
Things will play out very contextually, right? Like in different markets, things will happen in different parts of the country, in different parts of the world, in different populations and communities. Like, there will be different effects. But by and large, what you said makes sense to me, and totally feels feasible. Even in the way that I think about how I've applied AI to workflows that I have.
Yeah.
It's been a tool that's very much come alongside me in creation. Here's where I think maybe the hiccup might come, and why I don't necessarily believe that the effects will be drastic. Any technology that has been developed in the last, since computers, I guess, were invented, that is hardware intensive. So I think of everything from VR to crypto to now AI. Those technologies have been hard to they've faced a lot of challenge in mass market adoption. Getting enough people access to this type of thing without it being prohibitively expensive,
right,
is hard, just because transistors on a chip, it's expensive. Right, you need massive. I think if people really understood how much processing power it takes to run ChatGPT, Sora, any of that stuff, especially the image ones. Because you're dealing with pixel math.
Yeah.
Insane amounts. It's going to be difficult to get that into everybody's hands the way that we maybe saw it with ChatGPT 3.5 or whatever.
Sure.
Free to use if you go on and create an account. That's going to be really challenging for something image based. And so you might see kind of what studios might own the capability to use something like that for filmmaking, but content creators, and it might be hard to open it up to that. So I just kind of wonder. Wonder if that role also is going to play a role, just because of what we've seen over the past few years with the mass market adoption of things like that.
Sure. So you mentioned using it in your own workflow. For me, for this very podcast, I use Autopod. It'd be cool if they sponsored us. But it's cut my post-production time from essentially hours to minutes. I still watch the episodes through, so that's time blocked. But like my actual like cognitive, I need to use my editor filmmaker brain. It's almost nothing. It's crazy compared to what it was just, I don't know, 5 years ago. What are some of the things that you've been using it for?
So I too have used Autopod to cut multicam edits and social clips. They have a feature for that as well. I haven't found them to be perfect, but especially the multicam feature works super well, and that cuts the editing time down. But it's almost like the things that should be made easier are being made easier, right? Like a multicam edit is something where it's like there's especially in a podcast setting, which is the only thing that tool is really good for, is a podcast multicam edit.
Yeah, fair.
Something that where the audio is mapped directly to a single person's like camera feed.
Yep.
So I don't see that as complicated as cutting something like a live music session, which would require some artistry to it.
I couldn't imagine
like you have to make creative decisions about where you're going to cut to. And this is so different than that. It doesn't really take a creative skill to do this kind of thing. So for me, as someone who like values creativity and wants to preserve like the human agency and like ownership of that, I like that. I like those types of helpful tools.
Yeah.
In a more creative way, though, I have tried to write a full music video treatment with ChatGPT.
Okay.
And I wanted to hate it so much. I can't explain to you how much I wanted to dislike what it gave me.
Yeah.
I would never make the video that it gave me, but it was pretty like surprisingly well thought out.
Respectable. Yeah.
And I've heard, depending on how you position ChatGPT or any other like sort of like modern AI tool in your workflow, you can look at it as a way to iterate on ideas.
Yeah.
To like maybe get some of the overused ones out of the way.
Sure.
And be like, oh, maybe we don't go with that cliche or this cliche, or just like figure out what are possibilities, like what are some possibility of stories that I don't see, knowing that you're going to come to the table and do most of the authorship anyway.
I think that's fair. Like I use it almost always as a starting ground, like you said, to check my possibilities, and then I'll do like, I don't know, I'll call it the human effort of, the creative aspect. I'll touch it up. I'll reshape some stuff. And then at the very end, I use it to check my blind spots.
Yeah.
Like, hey, what do you think about this? Be real harsh. And then it just tells me a bunch of stuff. I'm like, microphone. I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah, I should probably consider that. And then I'll make some tweaks and iterations. Yeah.
It's totally fun. I like, who was it this week? It was like, they released the one that talks in a very convincing human voice.
ChatGPT 4.0. Are we talking about like the Scarlett Johansson thing? How it
that
sounds
thing.
like her? Yep.
Yeah, totally, yeah. It feels weird that like maybe we reached this point where we have one of those like sci-fi movie things
it's getting close.
that exists.
It's getting close.
The last 3 to 4 years, it's like, hey, is science fiction real, you guys? Like, and a lot of it has been smoke and mirrors. Like, yeah, it's kind of real, but it's kind of not.
Yeah.
And AI notoriously has this sort of like, I've heard it talked about as like the last mile of AI. The last mile of the race, like, is the hardest to close.
Yeah.
There's a gap, right? Like a human always has to be somewhere in the system. We have computer like systems that are really good at content moderation. Yep. But they're not perfect. And so there still has to be a team of humans to go through and pick out stuff. Like, what seems like it's completely AI usually isn't. And I think that's probably going to be true about video. Like you're going to get a video from something like Sora and you're going to be like, I like this mostly, but there are some things I need to tweak and like, it's not perfect. And so, and this is something that I think is like true about computing in general. When you go to a computer science school and you start to like reframe, I showed up with no coding experience.
I gotcha.
And so it was like, hey, like you have to be really, really specific when you talk to a computer. You have to tell it exactly what you want it to do in a language that it understands. And if you tell it something the way you think you said it, but it reads it in its own language. Like you're not going to get what you want.
Yeah.
And I think like abstracting to English or whatever like colloquial language that you want to like use to try to give casual explanations, you still have to be pretty friggin' specific if you want exactly. And this is another place where I think it might catch friction in filmmaking. Filmmakers can be some of the most stubborn, detail-oriented people.
Very much so.
Like people who care about like the character of the fall off of the bokeh in like, you know, like, or just like very specific details about lighting.
Yep.
The lenses people use. There's an artistry to the physicality that I think is irreplaceable. And sure, it'll be cool when AI can replicate that in pretty convincing ways, but I just don't think it'll ever be the thing that we love to do, you know?
I think that's nice to have the human be like the last mile between, you know, AI might get most of the grunt work, the, I don't know, really tedious, monotonous stuff out of the way. And then the human can kind of do the last finishing touches, the final shape up, you dust it, you polish it, you make it look nice.
Yeah. And something you said earlier about how AI is always been sort of like a force multiplier. I think that is true about pretty much any scale of AI that we've seen so far. If you think about like most of the major tech innovations that have really created new media, and like new ways of interacting with each other and exchanging information, they've almost always been hardware. And I think like maybe always have been. Like I think about like computing in general. So that's number one. And then personal computing, maybe the internet, although maybe that seems like a software application. It's
very much
not.
Hardware.
It's very physical. Maybe smartphones. That's a hardware device. And I think like, I don't know, I think of things like, have you seen this is maybe not the best, but I think it's a pretty good characterization of this. Have you ever seen I think it's on Peacock actually, Brave New World. It's a miniseries
like
adaptation.
The book Brave New World? Okay, got it. Okay.
And I just kind of stumbled across this. It didn't really hit the market very hard. I don't know if it's just because Peacock made it right when they were at the beginning or if still no one's on Peacock. But I thought what was cool about the way they depicted the sort of the like world where everyone just has a contact lens.
Okay.
And you experience your life in just like a immersively mediated way. I think something like that is probably the thing that would be most disruptive as compared to AI. Like that'll be the thing that changes how we really do.
So it's essentially
filmmaking.
choose your
Do you know
reality,
what I mean?
right? Is that kind of what it boils down to?
Yeah, like it's like in Brave New World, it's like everybody is on the same feed, which if you can imagine, a lot of the software pieces are already in place. Like social media feeds oftentimes just feel like one big channel and like
the algorithm
flow,
just shoving
river
stuff,
of information. And AI is like a piece where computers will be very quick and smart at making decisions and figuring out how to get information to you in a quick and easy way. But that's, it's just more of a piece of the puzzle. It's not the whole thing. And it's not the foundation of it. So I think when filmmaking will really change will be when we're starting to like default towards immersive experiences that are not even like VR. Like VR is a middle step. And so I think, I don't know. I think even in those cases that we're still always going to be looking back at things like the movie theater, the cell phone, the computer screen, the TV screen. I think the frame will still hold a lot of power as just like a character in media. Because it allows us to focus our attention. And as long as we're agent humans who want to use technology and not let it use us, especially if our world's going to get more immersive, we're going to want that tool. We're going to want that separation between the media and the real world. So I know that that's Jason.
Right.
And not
Digital Jason or
Digital Jason.
Avatar. Yeah.
There's your new Instagram handle, Digital Jason.
I love it. Fantastic.
I feel like that's a pretty solid one, actually.
As far as
It's got
Instagram
like a ring
handles goes,
to
that's not
it.
bad. That's fascinating because, I've thought about these emerging technologies, like you said, AR, VR, hell, I don't know, even a brain chip so we can get some sort of like Sword Art Online thing going. But I never thought about the filmmaking aspect of that. That's something that I'm going to have to spend more cycles really thinking through.
I thought about it in college a little bit when VR was still... I mean, VR had kind of gone through this early phase of development where they're like, hey, we have this cool technology. You can put on a headset and have an immersive experience that feels like there's no edge of the frame.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, sick. How much does it cost? And they were like, a lot.
Your firstborn child. Yeah.
Yeah. But as part of that first wave of development, people started thinking, hey, what would it be like to make a movie for a VR headset? Like, what does filmmaking look like in that sense? How do you shoot it? Like, what does composition mean when there's no frame? Like, what do the actors do? It's more like a stage play, but like a movie was like a stage play on a 2D, but now we're back in 3D. Like, what do we do?
Yeah.
And so I think like maybe those questions might come up again if we get that far. But I think it's been weird. Like the market for now has decided that we don't want VR yet. Like we don't want that immersive thing yet. And I wonder if there's a more long-term like sentiment there.
It's hard to say because like you said, like VR is it's always been ungodly expensive. And then even when you buy the thing, because there's no population, there's no user base, people don't want to develop for it. And then because people don't develop for it, no one wants to use it.
Right.
So it's this vicious chicken and egg cycle.
And I think if it doesn't, if the Apple effect doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because Apple was like, yeah, it's still expensive, but it's Apple. Let's just try that.
Yeah.
And I have yet to see someone with a Vision Pro.
I've only seen them online.
Yeah. And I think like it's a cool idea to be able to think about filmmaking for VR. I think that would be an experience that I'd be interested in, just from a pure like creativity standpoint. But yeah, it's hard to want to go after something like that when no one's going to see it. I'm going to have to spend a lot of money to see it. So
honestly, I think the only way to really solve that problem and get that ecosystem going is to reduce the cost down to where it really becomes a commodity that everyone can use. And only at that point will, that technology and that, medium really start to get built up.
Right. But then most of the time, the only way for that to happen is for companies to switch to a selling your data model for profit instead of the technology itself. And then you get into surveillance capitalism and all this stuff that maybe we don't love as citizens who at least think we live in a democracy. But it's hard to think of it all connected that way and like want to experience VR, but maybe we just want it where it is. Maybe we want it as like a don't own a boat, but have a friend who has a boat. Like, don't own a Vision Pro, but like have a friend who has a Pro so you can use it sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Just go over to their house when it's convenient.
Yeah.
I like that idea. So a closing tradition that we have on the show is the previous guest leaves a question for the current guest, not knowing who that current guest will be. The question left for you is, what is one of the most creative solutions you've had to a technical problem that you've faced?
Okay. You'll give me ample time to think about this.
Sure will.
You people on the internet will also. I think creative solution to a technical problem. I've got one in mind. I just want to make sure it's the top one. It definitely wasn't the time last week when I taped a camera to a tripod because I was missing the base plate. And I definitely didn't do that. So
I've been there.
It's not that creative, man.
I mean, with enough gaff tape, you can do anything, right?
Yeah, totally. It was masking tape, but we just won't discuss it. Let's see. The fly-through shot in the music video, because there were a lot of really technical challenges with that one. There was something that really felt like satisfying about figuring out a solution to get that shot.
Yeah.
Because I would say like the technical problem involved there was like, how do you control the camera through a tight space like that, while still maintaining a shot that's interesting and has a story and doesn't fall apart from a technical standpoint?
Yeah.
Like, were we really close to losing enough focus that it doesn't work? Yeah, but like like within those limits of what you're still okay with, those takes that my friend Kiara and I did in rehearsal were super fun, because there was multiple times along the way where I thought, we aren't going to be able to pull this off. This idea was too ambitious. We need a bigger crew and like people with more experience. But you just kind of put your head down and be like, what if we tried one more thing?
Sure. Yeah.
And then you open the car door and you're like, all right, I got to have the car door open so I have enough space to reach over the seat.
Mm-hmm.
But how does that work with the story? Oh, it actually might add urgency to the shot if like the doors are open and it feels like they just left their car idling there at the beginning of the video instead of like parked it clean and nice up against the curb.
It's a feature, not a bug. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. You kind of find ways, and it makes it more exciting because the video starts out with the kind of like, when you plug an old car, you have the key in the ignition, but it's not on. Yeah. And the doors are open, so it's dinging.
Yep.
Right. And it's kind of like this ominous, like, starting thing that, like, the audio leads you into the video. Mm-hmm. And it just ended up working out that way. I think that's the kind of creative problem solving that maybe you don't initially think about when you think about filmmaking. You might think about the idea as something that's creative. You might think about how you're going to edit it as something that's creative, because that's what people see. Yeah. But the creative solutions that you have to come up to just try to get the thing to work. Yeah. You can't, I don't know. Like, I don't typically think about those things when I'm planning stuff. And I'm always surprised when the problems come up and you're like, all right, I got to think on my toes. But it's just one more place you get to be creative. And I think that's a good exercise all the time.
Ryan, thank you so much for coming on the show. Your insight to filmmaking, even though I'm pretty well versed on my own, I love always hearing about other people's experiences. There's always room for me to grow, and there's always room for me to develop the craft further. And I think you've, given me some really valuable insight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man. And I can't wait to work with you some more, hopefully.
Absolutely. So before we break, where can people find you, and where would you like to draw people's attention to?
Great question. I have an Instagram page where you can interact with me. So that is at Ryan V Media on Instagram. I don't get enough DMs. DM me, like,
slide right in there.
Like, send me an idea. Like, I don't know. And then I have a website, and it's just ryanvannucci.com/hey, because
why not?
Yeah. And so there you can find some samples of projects. You can find a way to get in touch with me via email, my contact form, and then you can also find I have a little journal section where I write little think pieces about AI and weird stuff in tech. So
stuff to ponder.
Stuff to ponder, exactly.
All right, cool. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Cheers.
Thanks, Jason.